My name is Laura Hill, and I grew up in a small town called Corvallis, Montana. Growing up in a small town has its advantages and disadvantages, but for me, the main disadvantage was the constant pressure. In my house, a university degree meant more than any other type of achievement. For my family, if you didn't have a degree from a respectable university, you were nobody. And honestly, that was a reality I simply couldn't accept. My father, James Hill, was always the epitome of a serious and focused man. He was a history professor at Montana State University, and his demeanor was always impeccable. He dressed in well-tailored suits, and even at home, his voice had the tone of someone in a classroom. I grew up listening to his lectures on the importance of pursuing a respectable career: law, medicine, politics, or academia. For him, these were the only valid paths. My mother, Helen Hill, was the principal of the town's high school, and her worldview wasn't much different. She believed that discipline and tradition were the pillars of success. My sister Emma's life was always what my family saw as ideal. She got into Harvard at 18, and since then, became the star of our family. I, on the other hand, was always seen as the daughter who didn't quite have what it took to succeed. While Emma recited Franklin Roosevelt's graduation speech at 10, I felt lost amidst the expectations placed upon me. It's not that I wasn't good at studying, because I was, but something inside me, since I was little, told me that my life wouldn't be about following a traditional path. I didn't know exactly what I wanted, but I was sure it wasn't that. I remember a moment that always stuck with me. I was 15 and sitting at the kitchen table, while my father talked about the opportunities Emma had and how he expected me to follow the same path. Emma had been accepted into Harvard Medical School, and my father, with a proud smile, said, "She is our true star. She will change the world, Laura." His gaze was fixed on Emma, and I just watched from afar. He didn't see value in me if I wasn't on the same trajectory. As the years passed, I sank deeper and deeper into this mold that didn't fit me. My parents constantly pressured me to be more like Emma, to follow in her footsteps. Every decision I made seemed to be compared to hers. When I managed to sell a website I created for a small local business, I thought I would finally have their approval. What I didn't know was that for them, this was just a hobby. It wasn't a promising future. My father looked at me with disdain and said, "Do you really think this crap will get you anywhere? It won't do anything for you. If you want to be a programmer for the rest of your life, fine, but don't expect help from us." That hurt, more than I could express. I knew what I was doing had value, but within that house, there seemed to be no room for dreams that didn't involve a degree or a traditional career. I knew that, somehow, I was failing their expectations. But I also knew that I couldn't continue living a lie, trying to be who they wanted me to be. The pressure was immense, and the loneliness even greater. The decision I made at that moment was risky, but necessary. I was no longer going to bow to their expectations. I was not willing to spend another second trying to fit into a mold that didn't fit me. It was time to take control of my own life, and I knew that, to do so, I would have to leave home. When the time came to tell them, the tension in the air was palpable. I already knew what they were going to say, but still, I couldn't go back. What I was about to say was irreversible. I turned to my father and mother and, with a firm voice, said, "I'm not going to college. I don't want to follow Emma's path. I want to start my own business. I have a plan. I've already gotten my first client and saved almost $4,000 from website projects." My father, his face contorted with rage, immediately stood up from the table, knocking over the chair in the process. "This is not going to happen. Not while you're under my roof," he shouted. His voice was laden with contempt, and I felt the humiliation he was causing me. I tried to explain that I had something bigger in mind, but his words cut like knives. He never looked at me the same way after that day. My mother, her eyes filled with tears, whispered, You're going to throw everything away, Lara. How can you do this to us? How can you do this to yourself? I couldn't look at them anymore. The weight of their words suffocated me, but at the same time, something inside me ignited. I knew I was doing what needed to be done. Without saying anything more, I packed my things and left home. My father's words echoed in my head, but I didn't look back. The decision was made. I was alone now, without my family's support, without the comfort I had always known, but with renewed strength. I was going to a new beginning, a new world. I didn't know exactly what awaited me, but I knew that anything would be better than continuing to live a lie. I had to follow my path, not theirs. I grabbed my laptop and the clothes I managed to pack and left everything behind. And even without knowing where this would lead me, I felt that from that moment on, my life was in my hands. I was ready to start a new journey. But what happened next? What would my new beginning be like? The answer would come faster than I imagined. When I left my house, I didn't know exactly what I was expecting, but I knew I couldn't continue in that life. I was scared, of course. It wasn't easy to give up the security of a home, even if that home was so suffocating. My world had fallen apart, and I was completely alone. But the one thing I was sure of was that I couldn't go back. I had chosen a path of no return. I arrived in Seattle with little more than a backpack and an old laptop. I rented a small apartment in the city center, a place that was barely 40 square meters. But it was enough to start. The wooden floor creaked with every step, and the thin walls let the street noise invade. But it was my space. And there, in that small corner of the world, I would make things happen. I knew I had no time to lose. I was beginning to understand that the world wasn't as simple as I imagined. I already had some knowledge of how to build websites, but now I had to do more than that. I needed to create a real business that generated real money. There was no one else to support me or give me advice, and the fear of failure was a constant shadow. Doubt consumed me, but at the same time, the adrenaline of doing something for myself gave me strength. The first thing I did was start working on a project I had in mind, Local Made. I knew I wanted to help small local artisans sell their products online, but of course the market was saturated with so many options. I needed something that would differentiate me, something that would give me a chance to really help. I knew it wasn't a revolutionary platform, but it was something I truly believed in. I built the website in the first few weeks. My budget was tight, and I knew I couldn't make mistakes. Every line of code, every pixel of the page had to be in the right place. I spent sleepless nights trying to understand what could work and how to attract clients. There was no money for advertising, so the only option was to work hard, make contacts, and if possible, convince someone to trust me. The first few days were difficult. I spent the whole day coding, and at night, sent cold emails to local stores and artisans, offering my services. Most of the time, the responses were cold or didn't come back. But the worst of all was when I received a reply from a local pottery shop. The owner, an older man named Harold, replied, "Are you telling me you're trying to sell products online without a degree? Good luck with that." I was silent for a few minutes. I didn't know if that would hurt me or push me even further to prove my worth. I decided not to answer, but I couldn't help but wonder, was he right? Days passed, and money ran out faster than I imagined. I ate fast food every day and barely had money to pay the bills. I barely slept and didn't know how to continue. Sometimes I found myself wondering if I had made the right choice, or if I was just running away from reality. But there was something inside me, a flame, that wouldn't let me give up. I couldn't go back. When my bank account balance reached almost zero, I realized I needed a quick solution. That's when, in a moment of pure need, I found a local business event. It was a free meeting about how to expand small businesses. I had nothing to lose. That night I decided to go, not knowing quite what to expect. It was there that I met Maya Cooper. She was speaking about how to scale a small business, and at the end, she offered valuable tips to the participants. I don't know what made me go up to her after her presentation, but something inside me said she could be the key to the change I so desperately needed. Maya had a calm but powerful presence. At 45, she had already been through countless twists and turns in her life and had an experience I could barely comprehend. She was the founder of a small consulting firm, and despite a long history of success, was incredibly humble. We talked for a few minutes, and upon hearing about my Local Made project, she looked at me with an interesting expression and said, "You're on the right track, but you're aiming at the wrong target." These words paralyzed me. I knew I had to hear more, so I asked her to explain, and that's how she told me about the transformation I needed to make to truly grow. You shouldn't focus on selling products one by one to consumers. What you need is to offer solutions to businesses. Instead of just selling to small artisans, think about how you can help local stores who might need management platforms. Focus on B2B, and things will change. I was speechless. The idea seemed so simple, yet revolutionary to me. Instead of trying to grow with a basic website for small stores, she challenged me to think differently. She gave me a completely new vision, and at that moment, something changed inside me. In the days that followed, I redid the entire planning for Local Made. I started focusing on helping local businesses manage inventory and sales more efficiently. With this, I began to offer more personalized solutions and truly approached a market of businesses, not consumers. The work became even more intense, but now I knew where I was going. For the first time, I felt like I was on the right track. Clients started to appear, and with that, my confidence also grew. I was no longer just trying to survive. Now, I was starting to build something with purpose. But what I didn't know was that the changes were just beginning. That same week, I received an email that would change everything. The email I received was simple, but at the same time, it seemed like a big turning point. The message said, "We are interested in your software for one of our stores." However, I would never have imagined that that email would be the first step towards an even greater transformation. The message in my email made me stop for a moment. I had read it several times, as if it were some kind of typo, but there it was, written simply and directly. "We are interested in your software for one of our stores." The company was called Maple and Sage, a chain of handmade furniture stores. It wasn't a common client, not a small artisan looking for a simple solution. It was a store with 20 branches across the country. I knew this opportunity could be the chance for change I so desperately needed, but I also knew that I had no idea what was really behind this chance. I read and reread the email, trying to process the enormous responsibility it represented. In a few minutes, what was a simple idea of helping small artisans transformed into something completely different. I was about to deal with a contract that could be the milestone of my life. It was easy to feel a chill down my spine just thinking about how this could change everything. A part of me was still struggling, trying to understand if I was even capable of taking this forward. The idea of expanding my business so abruptly scared me, but I knew that if I let this opportunity pass, I might regret it forever. That same night, I contacted the Maple and Sage team, trying to show confidence. The conversation was cordial, and it became clear that they were just waiting for inventory and sales management software to integrate the store's various branches. I knew my platform was still rudimentary, but I was determined to make everything work. The following days were a whirlwind of meetings, sleepless nights coding, and trying to understand the complexities of a multi-location furniture store. I had never worked with such a large structure. At that moment, I felt that all the previous effort, all the nights I stayed awake and months of struggle, were about to be rewarded. It was during this process that, fortunately, I found the help of Maya Cooper, my mentor. She was the key to understanding what to do with that contract. She had once told me, You shouldn't focus on selling to the small end customer. Your focus needs to be on B2B, the companies that can truly benefit from your solutions. With Maple and Sage's proposal in my hands, I was beginning to understand how much this could transform my business. Maya, who had been an entrepreneur and mentor for years, guided me step by step. I was alone most of the time, but she was always available to give quick advice, help with strategic solutions, and guide me on what to do next. She suggested I be audacious. You're in the middle of something big, Lara. Don't be afraid to take the next step. Don't let your lack of experience make you hesitate. I followed her advice, knowing that the confidence I was gaining with Maple and Sage was something I couldn't waste. From that moment on, I completely dedicated myself to the work, rewriting parts of the code and adjusting the platform to meet the needs of the furniture store. The days were long, and the pressure was enormous, but something inside me said I was going in the right direction. About 2 weeks later, I received what would be the big test. Maple and Sage wanted a live demonstration of the software to evaluate its functionality. I knew I needed to deliver something impeccable, something that would exceed expectations. That night, we worked until 3 a.m., me and the small team I managed to gather. I didn't have the resources to hire a large team, but I had a freelance developer and a designer who were as committed as I was. We did our best to transform the initial version of the platform into a functional demonstration. The moment of the presentation finally arrived. My nerves were on edge. I had never been in front of such a large client, and I knew that what I would show there would not just be a product, but a reflection of my effort, my vision, and my future. I joined the video call with the Maple and Sage team, my heart racing. The screen was full of faces I didn't know, but I felt the weight of the importance of that meeting. In the beginning, everything seemed very calm. I shared the screen and began to show the system's functionalities, explaining how the platform could optimize the sales process and inventory management for multiple stores. My heart beat faster with each slide. However, as the meeting progressed, something surprising happened. What I thought would be a simple presentation turned into a real conversation about how it could revolutionize their system. One of the team leaders looked at me and asked, "If we can integrate this system into our network, what would be the real impact on our operation? Are you saying your platform can track our sales in real time and still allow inventory control between stores in different states? This is a big risk, but it looks promising. Do you have experience at this level?" I took a deep breath and without hesitation replied, "Yes, I believe so. Although my experience is limited in terms of market scope, my platform is already operating successfully in small businesses. I can guarantee that with the correct integration, it will be able to handle your operation more efficiently than any other solution you are currently using." The room fell silent for a moment. My mind was racing, but I remained calm. I felt a sense of confidence invading my body. It wasn't the confidence of knowing I was right, but the confidence of doing the right thing. I knew that, more than the code, more than the platform itself, what I was offering was my vision of something simpler and more efficient for their business. After the silence, the team leader smiled and said, "We like what we saw. We're going to move forward with a contract proposal. Are you ready to implement the solution?" I almost couldn't believe what I was hearing. That conversation, that small idea that had started with a laptop and lonely nights, was now transforming into an opportunity that could change my life. Yes, it was real. I had just closed my first big contract. But what I didn't know was that this contract with Maple and Sage would only be the beginning. I was about to face a new challenge that, I knew, would test my limits. And the hardest part was yet to come. The contract with Maple and Sage was a milestone. I knew this was the moment my life was about to change. But what I didn't imagine was that this success would bring a new set of challenges, which would force me to question if I was truly ready for what professional life had in store for me. When I closed that contract, I didn't know how quickly things would move. The first implementation was a success. The system worked as well as I promised, and the feedback came quickly and positively. In less than a month, I was invited to a meeting with other large retail chains. What once seemed a distant dream was now becoming a reality. I no longer had time for doubts. The confidence I had begun to build in Local Made was now being validated by large companies, and I could no longer hide behind what I was at the beginning, an inexperienced programmer. But, with each contract closed, the pressure increased. I felt as if I was being tested all the time. What was once a simple platform for small artisans now became a fundamental part of large businesses. The responsibility I carried seemed heavier every day, and the distance between what I was and what people expected me to be was growing. I started to be invited to events and conferences. I remember once when I received an invitation to speak at the Tech Innovators Summit in San Francisco. I still couldn't believe I was being recognized as a reference in the technology market, but fear took over me. What would happen when people found out I didn't have a university degree? And more importantly, what would happen when my family found out about all this? I felt that over the years, I had grown even further apart from them. Although I was helping financially from afar, without them knowing, there was a hole between us that seemed impossible to fill. They knew nothing about what I was doing, about the life I was building, and that made me feel like a stranger in my own family. Still, opportunities continued to arise. What was once a struggle for survival now seemed like a sea of achievements. With each new contract, with each new investment, I saw my business growing, but at a very high personal cost. I was starting to feel increasingly distant from who I was. I was becoming the person I never wanted to be, the one who fills herself with work and money, but loses herself in the process. In a moment of clarity, after a particularly exhausting meeting with a new investor, I stopped to reflect on where my life was. It had been months since I had spoken to my parents, and when I did, the conversations were brief and distant. I felt dishonest with them. I knew my journey wouldn't have been easy for them to understand, but I wondered if it would be possible to get closer without losing my essence. That afternoon, I decided to take the first step. I called my mother. I was direct. "Mom, how are you?" I began. She seemed surprised, but didn't hesitate to answer. We talked for a few minutes, and she, as always, gave me the same old advice. "You're doing well, but what about college, Laura? You really should have a degree, dear. It would make you more respected, you know." I took a deep breath. I didn't know how to say what I really wanted. I didn't know how to break the silence that was forming between us. But then, I finally spoke. "Mom, I've built something that's really worthwhile. My company has grown and is helping many people. I don't need a degree to do that. I need to be who I am." She was silent for a moment. And, as expected, the conversation ended ambiguously, without a real understanding, but at least I had spoken the truth. At that moment, I realized that I could no longer hide what was happening. I could no longer live in two worlds. I was achieving success, but at the cost of my own happiness and authenticity. It was around this time that I received an acquisition offer for my company. The offer of $36 million seemed unbelievable. I knew that this money would solve all my problems and more. But, at the same time, something told me that selling Local Made would mean leaving behind everything I had built. More than the company, what I was creating there was a personal story of overcoming and authenticity. I didn't want that chapter to be closed like that. I thought a lot about the offer. I knew that selling the company would mean I could finally breathe financially. I could do everything I wanted, live without this constant pressure. But deep down, something inside me knew I wouldn't be happy with that decision. Selling would be like admitting that all the hard work and all the internal battles I had faced were worth nothing. The truth was that Local Made was more than a business to me. It was my identity, my freedom. So, I refused the proposal. With that decision, I also decided to make a significant change in how I presented myself to the world. I no longer cared about hiding my true story. I no longer wanted to be just the woman who had created a successful company, but the woman who had done it out of love for what she believed in, and not out of a simple desire for external validation. And in doing so, I began to realize that, by refusing to sell the company, I was actually saying yes to something much bigger. I was saying yes to myself, to my purpose, to the freedom to be who I am, without fear of being judged. But the biggest challenge was yet to come. I knew that the true transformation was not just in my work, but in what I was about to face within my own family. It was time to face the truth and finally see if my choice had been worth it. I did not sell Local Made. I refused the $36 million offer, and with that, made the most important decision of my life. That choice, which seemed so difficult at the time, made me realize that what I really wanted was not to accumulate wealth, but to maintain my integrity and live my truth. I didn't need the approval of others to be successful, nor external validation to know how much I was worth. The decision to refuse the sale was a milestone, not just for my career, but for my personal life. The pressure on me did not decrease. In fact, the weight of being a successful businesswoman increased with each new contract, each new project I closed. But something inside me calmed down. I knew I was no longer seeking a purely financial goal. I was seeking something deeper. I wanted to make a difference without losing my essence in the process. Over time, doors continued to open for Local Made. But now, I had a new purpose. It was no longer about proving that I could. It was about creating a legacy that had a real impact, not just in the business world, but in people's lives. I had achieved success, but what touched me most was the possibility of helping others get where I got, without having to follow the traditional path or the formula that the world seemed to impose. Still, there was an unresolved chapter: my family. I knew that, although my life had changed irreversibly, the relationship with them was still in suspense. They knew nothing about what I was really doing, nor about the success I was achieving. They only saw a woman who disappeared from their lives to pursue an impossible dream. They still saw me as the daughter who failed by not following the traditional path. It was then that, one winter day, I received a call from my mother. She had never directly sought me out to talk about what was happening in my life. Whenever we tried to talk, she would deflect to topics like my lack of a degree or the insistence on fitting into what she thought was correct. But this time, her voice had something different. There was no criticism, no accusations, just a simple request. "Lara, we want to talk to you. We need to understand what you've been doing." I knew that moment had come. I had distanced myself from them for so long, but the truth was that despite everything, there was still a desire to reconnect. And more than that, I wanted to show them that success is not measured by the standards they knew, but by the impact you have on your life and the world. At that meeting, in a simple cafe in the city, the conversation was tense at first, but soon became calmer. I had prepared a presentation, not of numbers or statistics from my company, but of who I really am. I talked about my journey, about the challenges I faced when leaving everything behind and starting from scratch. I talked about how I refused to sell my company because, for me, the value was in the mission I was creating, not in the money that could be earned. At the end of the conversation, my mother looked me in the eyes, and for the first time, I saw true acceptance. It wasn't something grand or emotional, but it was enough for me. She simply said, "I understand, Lara. You've always been stronger than I realized. I just wanted you to be happy. I hope you found your way." There was no more condemnation, just a silent respect. But the greatest moment of all came when my father, his eyes a little teary, said, "I was wrong. I never imagined you would be capable of creating something so big on your own. You did it in a way I couldn't understand. I'm proud of you." He didn't need to say anything more. His words were not just validating my work, but also my choice to be who I am, without asking permission. It wasn't a grand reconciliation full of hugs and tears. But that afternoon, in a simple cafe, I understood that what matters most in life is to be true to yourself. I didn't need their approval to move forward, but being able to finally share my truth with them was a weight off my shoulders. I no longer had to hide who I was or what I had achieved. As the year passed, my company continued to grow. Local Made became a known name in the industry of solutions for small businesses and artisans. My journey was published in several technology magazines, and I began to be invited to speak at conferences around the world. But silently, I decided to do something even bigger. I created the Lara Hill Foundation, focused on supporting entrepreneurs who, like me, did not follow the traditional path, but who had valuable ideas and solutions. I wanted to give these young people the chance to be recognized and helped, without the need for a degree or the validation of a system that often excluded them. I was invited for several interviews, but something inside me still preferred to maintain discretion about my personal life. The truth is, it no longer mattered what they thought of me. What mattered was that I was living my truth, without excuses, without fear, and most importantly, without trying to please anyone. One late afternoon, sitting in the office of my new headquarters in Clearwater, looking at the sea, I reflected on how everything had changed. I was finally at peace. There was no longer the search for acceptance, nor the pressure to prove something. I had achieved my freedom to be who I am, and with that, I knew that finally, I had won. Not by wealth, nor by fame, but by the courage to follow my own path.